Jack stood in the bustling hallways of the massive intergalactic station. It was a typical day. Soldiers rushed by carrying out their duties, but Jack wasn't in a hurry. He was known for his calm, collected manner and his ability to handle even the toughest situations without breaking a sweat. Today, however, felt different. The air was thick with tension, and the whispers of soldiers traveling in and out of the hallways were filled with something unfamiliar. As Jack made his way to the commander's office, his mind was focused on the usual paperwork and reports that needed attention. He had been on the station for months, helping with security, dealing with small skirmishes here and there and going about his usual routine. But the sound of his name being called stopped him in his tracks. "Jack," a voice echoed from behind. He turned around to see his commanding officer, Commander Kane, standing there with a serious look on his face. "Sir?" Jack responded, his voice steady. Kane glanced around to make sure no one was eavesdropping. "I need to speak with you privately. Follow me." Jack raised an eyebrow but nodded. He followed Kane down the hallway, his boots clicking against the polished floors. They reached the commander's office, a large room at the center of the station. Kane pushed open the door and motioned for Jack to enter. Inside, a group of alien warriors from the Xelian species was waiting. They were large, muscular, and known across the galaxy for their combat skills. Jack had heard of them before. The Xelians were famous for their pride and strength. They often traveled to different planets looking for challenges, testing their might against other species. But Jack had never faced one before. "Jack," Kane said, his voice firm. "These Xelian warriors are here for a challenge." Jack's eyes flicked to the warriors. They all stared at him, their expressions intense. One of them, the leader, a massive Xelian with dark red skin and sharp tusks, stepped forward. He crossed his arms and grinned. "You've been getting a lot of attention, human," the Xelian leader said, his voice deep and thick with an alien accent. "We've heard the stories of your battles. Now we want to see if those stories are true. We challenge you to a fight." Jack blinked, surprised. "A fight," he repeated, his tone calm. "What's the prize?" The Xelian leader chuckled. "If you win, you earn the respect of our people. If you lose, we'll take something of yours." His grin grew wider, revealing sharp teeth. Jack took a deep breath. He wasn't scared. He'd faced bigger and tougher opponents in the past, but this was different. These weren't just any alien warriors. The Xelians were a proud and powerful species, and their challenges were no joke. "I'll accept your challenge," Jack said, his voice steady. Commander Kane stepped forward. "Jack, this isn't a small matter. Xelians are known for their ruthlessness in combat. Are you sure about this?" Jack nodded. "I've handled worse." Kane studied him for a moment. "Then, but remember, you don't have to win by strength alone." Jack gave a small smile, understanding what Kane meant. He didn't need to outmuscle the Xelians. He was good at thinking his way out of situations, something the Xelians probably wouldn't expect. The real challenge would be getting inside their heads. The Xelian leader nodded at Jack. "The fight will take place in the arena in 1 hour. Prepare yourself." Jack turned and walked out of the commander's office, his mind already working on a plan. He had faced powerful enemies before, but what the Xelians didn't know was that Jack didn't rely on his muscles to win fights. He relied on his mind. The station's arena was massive. It had been designed for high-stakes battles, with obstacles and traps scattered throughout. The audience gathered, murmuring with excitement. Jack stood alone in the center of the arena, waiting for his opponents to arrive. The warriors filed in, their armor gleaming under the bright lights, and took their positions. They were here to fight, and they expected to win. The Xelian leader stepped forward and raised his arms. Let the fight begin. The moment the signal was given, the first warrior rushed at Jack, his fists swinging in a blur of speed and power. Jack didn't move. He waited, studying his opponent's movements, watching for the perfect moment to strike. The warrior swung at him again, and Jack sidestepped at the last second, causing the Xelian to stumble forward. Jack's quick thinking allowed him to lead the Xelian into one of the arena's traps, a large net hanging from the ceiling. As the warrior lost his balance and tumbled forward, Jack quickly pulled the lever, sending the net crashing down around the Zillion. The crowd gasped in surprise as the warrior struggled to free himself, but it was no use. He was caught. Jack didn't break a sweat. He turned to face the next Zillion. The leader growled in frustration, but his face twisted into something else, something Jack couldn't quite place. It was almost as if the Zillions were beginning to realize that brute strength wouldn't win this fight. Jack smirked to himself. He hadn't even started yet. The arena was silent for a moment after Jack's first victory. The Zillion warriors, their pride bruised by the unexpected trap, looked at each other. The leader, a towering figure with dark red skin, narrowed his eyes. Fight. But Jack had proven that he was more than just a simple human soldier. The crowd murmured in surprise at the cleverness of Jack's move. It wasn't often that someone could outsmart the Zillions. Jack stood in the center of the arena, calm and collected. He wasn't rushing. He wasn't worried. The first warrior had fallen into his trap easily, but Jack knew that things wouldn't be so simple with the next round. The Zillion leader was not going to make the same mistake. This time Jack would need to rely on more than just the environment. He had to get into their heads and make them doubt themselves. The leader of the Zillion warriors stepped forward, his large frame moving with surprising grace. He had a scar over one of his eyes, a mark of his long history in battle. His gaze was fierce as he locked eyes with Jack. He looked like a warrior who had never been defeated until now. The leader's voice boomed in the arena as he called out to his fellow warriors. "Do you see, my brothers? This human thinks he can outsmart us, but he does not understand our power. It is time to teach him what true strength is." The other Zillions grunted in agreement, their eyes full of anger. They were used to winning, and the idea of being outwitted by a human was something they couldn't accept. But Jack wasn't intimidated. He had seen it all before, prideful enemies who thought they were unbeatable. And every time it was there, arrogance that led to their downfall. As the leader advanced toward him, Jack stayed still. He didn't move, didn't flinch. The Zillion leader rushed at him with a roar, his massive fists swinging in an attempt to land a crushing blow. But Jack, as he had done before, sidestepped just in time, causing the leader to miss by inches. The Zillion's powerful punch hit nothing but air, and he stumbled slightly. The crowd gasped. They had expected Jack to be overwhelmed by the sheer force of the Zillion, but once again, he showed them that he was more than capable of handling himself. The leader growled, his pride wounded by the miss, but he wasn't done yet. Jack took a few steps back, his mind working quickly. He knew the Zillions relied on their brute strength, but they weren't very fast in their thinking. They didn't plan ahead, they just attacked. Jack's advantage was his ability to stay calm under pressure and think through every move. The leader came at him again, more cautiously this time. He moved with calculated steps, no longer letting his anger cloud his judgment. Jack kept his distance, watching every shift in the leader's stance. He could tell that the Zillion was trying to find an opening, trying to predict Jack's next move. But Jack wasn't about to give him one. Instead of running, Jack stopped and turned his back to the leader, as if he were giving up. The audience gasped again, wondering if Jack had finally made a mistake. But Jack wasn't fooled. He could hear the Zillion's footsteps getting closer, and he knew it was time. At the last second, Jack spun around and dropped low to the ground, sweeping the leader's legs out from under him with a quick, smooth motion. The Zillion leader fell hard, slamming into the ground with a loud crash. The crowd cheered as the leader struggled to get up, his confidence shaken. For a moment, the Zillion leader just lay there, staring up at the ceiling of the arena, breathing heavily. Jack stood above him, offering a hand, but the leader didn't take it. His pride was too great. He pulled himself up and glared at Jack, clearly more angry than before. But Jack could see the doubt in his eyes now. The leader was no longer sure of himself. The Zillion warriors were starting to grow restless. They had been watching their leader, waiting for him to show them how to defeat this human. But now they were questioning everything they had known about themselves. Jack had taken down one of their strongest warriors without lifting a finger in anger. He wasn't fighting with violence. He was using his mind. As the leader stood up, he nodded to his warriors, signaling for them to move in. He wasn't going to let Jack get the best of them again. The other Zelians circled Jack, each one waiting for their chance to strike. They thought they could overpower him with numbers, but Jack had a different idea. He raised his hands, signaling for them to stop. "Are you sure you want to continue?" Jack's voice was calm, almost bored. "You've already seen what I can do." The Zelians paused, their expressions shifting. They weren't used to being questioned, especially not by a human. They had expected a battle of strength, not one of wits. The leader looked at his warriors, who were now unsure. They had been outmaneuvered once, and they weren't eager to make the same mistake again. Jack could see the hesitation in their eyes. This was his chance to push further. He took a step forward, his eyes focused on the leader. "You wanted a fight, but all I see is a bunch of warriors who don't understand what it means to truly be strong. Strength isn't just about muscles or power. It's about knowing when to fight and when to walk away." The leader glared at him, his pride boiling over. But Jack wasn't backing down. He had already won. "You said Part 3, 950 words, ka, leko, or interesting huna, chaya, or third person." The Zelian leader stood still, his anger burning in his chest. Jack's words had struck a nerve. He had never been questioned like this before. The Zelians were used to dominating their opponents, not being made to look foolish. But Jack's calmness, his strategy, it had shaken them. The warriors around the leader whispered to each other, clearly unsure of what to do next. The leader clenched his fists, the muscles in his arms tightening as he prepared to attack again. "Enough," the leader shouted, his voice booming across the arena. "You will regret this, human." Jack didn't move. He wasn't worried. He had seen this before, an enemy who let their pride get the best of them. The leader was angry now, and that meant he would make mistakes. The Zelians were strong, yes, but they lacked the one thing that made Jack dangerous: strategy. Strategy, Jack knew, was more important than anything. The Zelian leader took a step forward. His eyes locked on Jack, his expression filled with hatred. He wasn't going to fall for Jack's mind games again. This time he would overpower him. The warriors behind him shifted, ready to fight. "Come then," Jack said, his voice calm but firm.
What?
"Let's see what you've got." With a growl, the leader lunged. His massive fist swung toward Jack with terrifying speed. "What?" But Jack was ready. At the last moment, he ducked low, narrowly avoiding the leader's punch. The force of the blow caused a nearby pillar to crack, sending a shower of dust into the air. Jack didn't waste any time. He immediately rolled to the side, coming up behind the leader, who was still recovering from his missed attack. With a swift movement, Jack kicked the leader's legs out from under him again, sending him crashing to the ground once more. The audience gasped in surprise. They had expected the Zelian leader to easily overpower the human, but Jack was proving to be much more than they had bargained for. The leader quickly regained his balance, his breathing heavy. He growled in frustration, glaring at Jack. "You're lucky this arena has so many obstacles," he snarled. "But I won't be fooled again." Jack stood back, keeping his distance. He wasn't ready to strike yet. He needed the leader to make the next move. The leader charged at him again, but this time Jack didn't dodge. He moved just out of reach, letting the leader crash into a wall. The force of the collision rattled the arena, and for a moment, the leader was dazed. That was all Jack needed. With lightning speed, Jack sprinted forward, grabbing a nearby piece of debris. He hurled it toward the leader, who was still trying to shake off the blow to his head. The debris hit the Zelian in the shoulder, knocking him off balance once more. The leader staggered back, roaring in anger. "You think you can beat me with tricks? I'll crush you, human." But Jack didn't respond. He didn't need to. He was waiting for the right moment, watching the leader closely. The leader's movements were starting to slow. The frustration was evident on his face. The longer this fight went on, the more mistakes he made. Jack was patient, and he knew that in a battle of endurance, he had the upper hand. The Xelian warriors, watching from the sidelines, began to murmur. They had never seen their leader struggle like this. They had always believed that strength alone was enough to win any fight. But Jack was proving that it wasn't. He was showing them that brains could be just as powerful as brawn. The leader's frustration reached its peak. With a deafening roar, he charged at Jack once more, this time with everything he had. Jack was ready. As the leader came within range, Jack sidestepped again, this time using the leader's momentum to his advantage. The leader flew past him, crashing into a pile of metal crates. The impact sent a shockwave through the arena. The crowd went silent. They couldn't believe their eyes, as the mighty Xelian leader had just been outsmarted again. Jack stood tall, his breathing steady. He hadn't broken a sweat while the leader was panting heavily, struggling to get up from the wreckage. Enough. The leader bellowed. I will not lose to this human. But even as he said the words, his voice wavered. He wasn't sure anymore. The defeat was beginning to sink in. Jack slowly walked toward him, not in a rush, but with a purpose. You wanted a fight, Jack said, his voice low and calm. But you didn't want to think. You didn't want to outsmart your opponent. You only wanted to crush me. The leader's eyes flashed with anger, but Jack didn't care. He had already won. I'll teach you one thing, Xelian, Jack said, his voice firm. Sometimes the strongest warriors aren't the ones who can lift the heaviest weapons or deliver the hardest blows. They're the ones who know how to win without a single punch. The Xelian leader was silent for a moment. Jack's words were sinking in, but his pride was too strong to admit defeat. He got to his feet, glaring at Jack with a fierce intensity. I'll finish this, the leader growled, still determined to defeat him. But Jack could see the cracks in his confidence. You already lost, Jack replied softly. The leader's hand twitched, but instead of attacking, he paused. For a brief moment, Jack saw something he hadn't expected out. The leader wasn't sure of himself anymore. The audience watched in, tense silence, waiting to see what would happen next. Would the Xelian leader finally admit defeat? Or would he continue the fight and risk further embarrassment? Jack didn't care either. The silence in the arena stretched on for what seemed like an eternity. Jack stood in the center, calm as ever, while the Xelian leader still fought to regain his composure. The leader, now covered in dust and bruises, glared at Jack with growing frustration. His pride had taken a massive blow, and he wasn't ready to admit defeat. Jack had seen this many times before, when an enemy refused to accept that they were beaten. The leader's breathing was heavy. His eyes narrowed with determination. He wasn't going to let Jack make a fool of him. He took a few slow, deliberate steps back and raised his hand. The other Xelians, who had been watching the fight carefully, looked at each other. It was clear to them that their leader was struggling, but they had been taught never to back down. You're wasting your time, Jack said, his voice calm. You've already lost. The Xelian leader clenched his fists tightly. He wasn't about to let a human mock him like this. He was a warrior. He had earned his strength in countless battles across the galaxy. He wasn't going to let a human soldier outsmart him. He would prove that brute strength was all that mattered. The leader turned to his warriors. Bring me the next challenger, he ordered, his voice cold and filled with rage. I will crush him, and then we will take his ship as a trophy. Another Xelian warrior stepped forward. This one was slightly smaller than the leader, but still incredibly strong. His sharp, piercing eyes locked onto Jack as he walked into the arena. His mind immediately began working. He had already outsmarted the first warrior. Now, he needed to deal with the second one. But this time, Jack would have to think faster. The Xelian warriors weren't stupid. They had learned from their leader's mistakes. They would be more careful. The new challenger cracked his knuckles and smirked at Jack. I will make this quick, he said, his voice laced with arrogance. I won't give you the chance to trick me. Jack didn't respond. He didn't need to. He knew what was coming next. The warrior charged, moving with incredible speed. Jack didn't flinch. Instead, he waited for the perfect moment to make his move. As the warrior got closer, Jack sidestepped quickly, narrowly avoiding the charging blow. The warrior stumbled forward, just like his leader had before him. Jack used the opportunity to strike. He pushed the Zelian warrior off balance, causing him to crash into a nearby wall. The impact was so strong that a few tiles on the floor cracked. The warrior groaned, struggling to get back up. But Jack was already several steps ahead. The warrior growled in frustration, his pride wounded. He wasn't used to being outsmarted like this, and now he was beginning to doubt his chances against Jack. He had seen how the first warrior had been easily trapped. Now he was facing the same fate. But instead of rushing in blindly, Jack took a more strategic approach this time. "Still not enough?" Jack said, his tone cool and mocking. "I thought you were faster than that." The warrior stood up, his muscles flexing as he took a deep breath. "I'll make sure you regret that," he growled. The next move came quickly. This time, the Zelian didn't charge blindly. He feigned a punch to Jack's right side, only to quickly change direction and aim for his left. Jack saw the feint coming, but he couldn't dodge both attacks. The Zelian's punch landed against Jack's shoulder, sending a sharp pain down his arm. Jack stumbled, but he quickly recovered. The Zelian was faster than the first warrior, and Jack knew he couldn't afford to make another mistake. His mind raced, and in that brief moment of pain, Jack realized something. The Zelians relied too much on their strength, but they lacked finesse. They hadn't trained for subtlety. That was his advantage. With a quick flick of his wrist, Jack grabbed a nearby pole that had been knocked over during the chaos. He swung it around and knocked the Zelian's feet out from under him, sending the warrior crashing to the ground. Jack quickly grabbed the pole and held it over the Zelian's chest, pinning him to the floor. The crowd went silent again. They had expected the Zelian warrior to win, but Jack had managed to outsmart him in the blink of an eye. The warrior struggled, but Jack kept the pole pressed firmly against his chest. He wasn't using all his strength to hold the warrior down. Instead, Jack used just enough pressure to keep the warrior trapped. Knowing that any more would end the fight too soon, "Yield," Jack said calmly, his voice steady. The Zelian warrior let out a frustrated growl, but he knew he had no choice. He couldn't break free. "Fine," he grunted. "You win." "You're not done yet, human." Jack released the pressure and stepped back, giving the warrior room to get up. The warrior scowled as he stood, dusting himself off. "You're clever, I'll give you that. But you won't be able to outsmart the leader again. He's stronger than I am." Jack didn't respond. He wasn't worried. He had already seen how the leader fought. The leader had power, but that was all. The Zelians hadn't trained in the art of deception, of using their minds to win. That was what made Jack dangerous. The leader, watching from the sidelines, growled, "You're wasting your time with this weakling. I'll finish it myself."
"But—"
Jack only smiled. He wasn't worried. He had already proven that he was more than just a soldier. He had proven that he could outsmart the Zelians. He had already won. The leader might have brute strength, but Jack had something even more powerful. His mind, and as long as he kept using it, the Zelians wouldn't stand a chance. "Your move," Jack said, turning toward the leader with a confident smile. The Zelian leader stepped forward, his eyes narrowing. This time, he would make sure there was no escape. But Jack was ready. He knew how this would end. The air in the arena grew thick with tension as the Zelian leader advanced toward Jack. His massive form loomed over Jack, casting a shadow that seemed to fill the space. The other warriors stood by, watching closely, knowing that the leader was their last hope of victory. The first two had failed, and now it was his turn. He was the most experienced, the strongest, and the one who was supposed to win. Jack, however, was unfazed. His stance was relaxed, his eyes focused, and his mind sharp. He knew the leader would be tough, but he had already outsmarted two. His warriors. The leader's strength might be his advantage, but Jack's intelligence would be his. The leader stopped just a few feet away from Jack, his fists clenched. "You think you've won, human?" The leader growled, his voice full of disdain. "But you're mistaken. I've fought countless battles, and no one has ever outsmarted me." Jack remained calm, staring into the leader's eyes. "You think you're the only one who knows how to fight? I've fought in more battles than you can count. But I don't rely on my strength. I rely on my mind. The leader let out a loud laugh, shaking his head. Your mind won't save you now. Without warning, the leader lunged forward faster than Jack had expected. His large, powerful hands reached out, aiming to grab Jack by the neck. Jack dodged to the side, barely avoiding the leader's grip. But the leader wasn't done. He spun around quickly, his massive foot swinging toward Jack's midsection. Jack had no choice but to leap backward to avoid being struck. The leader's strength was immense, and the sheer force of his attack created a shockwave that rattled the ground beneath them. The audience gasped in awe as Jack narrowly escaped the attack. But he was beginning to realize that the leader wasn't going to be easily outsmarted this time. The Xelian was faster, stronger, and more focused than ever before. Jack's mind raced. He had to find a way to turn the tide. The Xelian leader was relentless, but he had one weakness: his arrogance. The leader believed in his strength so much that he overlooked everything else. Jack needed to use that against him. As the leader charged again, Jack waited until the last possible moment. The leader swung his fist, aiming for Jack's head. This time Jack didn't dodge. Instead, he sidestepped just enough to grab the leader's arm, twisting it in a way that caused the Xelian to lose his balance. The leader fell forward, and Jack used his momentum to push the Xelian into a nearby pile of debris. The leader roared in frustration, quickly getting back to his feet. You think you can defeat me with tricks and dodges? Snarled. I am stronger than you. Human. Will break you. Jack didn't say anything. He didn't need to. He knew the leader was only getting more desperate. Every time the leader failed to land a blow, he became more reckless. And every time he became reckless, Jack was one step closer to winning. Leader charged again, this time more carefully. He swung his fists, aiming to trap Jack. Jack moved quickly, dodging the attacks, but he could feel the leader's power building. Jack needed to end this quickly before the leader realized he could still win. The arena was filled with the sound of clashing blows, and Jack could hear the leader's heavy breathing as he grew more and more frustrated. Finally, Jack saw the opening he had been waiting for. The leader made a mistake, left his side exposed. For just a split second, Jack saw it, and he acted immediately. With a swift motion, Jack grabbed a nearby metal rod and swung it toward the leader. The rod hit the leader's side, knocking him off balance once again. This time, the leader didn't recover as quickly. He staggered back, clutching his side. The pain was evident on his face. He was beginning to lose his confidence. You're not as invincible as you think, Jack said softly, his voice low but firm. You may have strength, but I have something far more powerful, the leader growled, his pride refusing to let him back down. But it was clear to Jack that the leader was slowing down. His movements were getting less fluid, his strikes less precise. Jack had finally worn him down. You will regret this, the leader muttered, still determined to finish the fight. But Jack didn't give him a chance to recover. In one final move, Jack rushed forward and disarmed the leader. With a quick swipe of his arm, he knocked the Xelian's weapon out of his hand and sent him stumbling backward. The leader fell to his knees, defeated. The crowd watched in stunned silence. No one had expected this. The Xelian leader, the one who was supposed to be the strongest, had been outsmarted and overpowered by a human soldier. Jack stood tall, looking down at the leader, who was now gasping for breath, his pride shattered. It's over, Jack said, his voice steady. The leader didn't respond, just stared at Jack, his chest rising and falling rapidly as he tried to regain his breath. The fight was over, and Jack had won. The Xelian warriors who had been watching from the sidelines were now silent. They had witnessed their leader's downfall, and they were forced to accept the truth strength alone was not enough. Jack had proven that Jack stepped back, giving the leader space to recover, but he didn't need to. The battle was already won. As Jack turned to face the crowd, he knew that he had earned their respect. He had outsmarted the Xelians, and in doing so, he had shown them that sometimes the mind is the most powerful weapon of all. But there was one final task left to do. He had to claim his prize, the commander's cat. With a smile, Jack walked toward the commander's office, the cat in his arms. It was time to return the feline to its rightful owner, and with it, prove once and for all that a clever mind could defeat even the strongest of warriors. Jack walked slowly down the hallway, the weight of the commander's cat gently resting in his arms. The arena's dust still clung to his uniform, but he felt no fatigue. His heart was steady, his mind still sharp. He had won. The Zillion leader had fallen, and the warriors had learned a valuable lesson today. Strength, no matter how great, wasn't always the deciding factor. Sometimes it was about thinking ahead, using your mind, and outsmarting your opponent. As Jack approached the commander's office, the door was slightly ajar. He could hear the faint hum of the station's ventilation system and the murmur of voices inside. The commander was likely reviewing reports or preparing for the next task, but Jack had something else on his mind. The cat, the small, soft creature, had become more than just a prize in the fight. It was a symbol of his victory, of his ability to turn the tables, even when the odds were against him. He knocked gently on the door before stepping inside. Commander Kane was seated at his desk, flipping through a set of holographic reports. His face was serious, his brow furrowed in concentration. But as soon as he looked up and saw Jack standing there with the cat in his arms, a smile crept across his face. "You did it," Kane said, standing up and walking around his desk. His tone was filled with surprise and something else, respect. He had seen the Zillion warriors come and go, but he had never witnessed one of his own soldiers outsmart them so completely. "I wasn't sure you'd pull it off, Jack, but you. Did you really did?" Jack handed the cat over to the commander with a grin. "You said I could take the cat as a prize if I won? I figured I might as well deliver it back to you personally." The commander took the small, furry creature in his arms, and the cat purred contentedly. For a moment, there was silence, just the soft sound of the cat's purring filling the room. "You know," Commander Kane said, his voice thoughtful, "I've watched you for a long time, Jack. You're more than just a soldier. You've got a unique talent. Most soldiers focus only on physical strength, but you think, you strategize, outsmart your enemies, and that's why you came out on top today." Jack nodded, his gaze steady. "Strength is important, sir, but so is knowing when to fight and when to step back. Not every battle is won by brute force." Kane smiled, clearly impressed. He placed the cat back down on his desk and turned to face Jack more seriously. "You're right. I've been in this job for longer than I care to admit, and I've seen more battles than I can count. But you've got something special. The way you handled the Zillion warriors, how you made them doubt themselves, it was something I didn't expect." Jack shrugged modestly. "I just did what I had to do." But the commander wasn't done. "I've been thinking. I know you've been serving in security for some time now, but I want you to think about something else. You're a strategist, Jack, not just a soldier. I want to offer you a special position, something higher than what you've been doing. A role that focuses on, well, the kinds of challenges you faced today." Jack raised an eyebrow. "Special position." Sir Kane nodded. "Yes, your skill set is rare. Most soldiers would have thrown themselves into the fight, relying on their strength to win, but you thought, you used your head. And that's exactly the kind of thinking we need on the front lines." Jack was taken aback. He hadn't expected this. He had only wanted to win the fight, to prove that a human could beat the odds. He hadn't considered what would happen after the battle. "I don't know, sir," Jack replied, his voice thoughtful. "I've always been comfortable in my role. I'm used to the security detail. I don't know if I'd be suited for a new position." Commander Kane smiled warmly. "That's the thing, Jack. You're more than suited for it. I believe you'll be able to make a bigger impact if you step into a role where you can truly use your mind to shape the battles ahead. You've got potential, and I want to see you take it further." Jack stood there for a moment, considering the offer. It wasn't an easy decision. His life had been about security, about staying in the background and making sure everything went smoothly. He wasn't sure he was ready to step into something bigger. But at the same time, there was a part of him that knew the commander was right. He had been thinking differently than most others. Maybe this was his chance to prove that his way of thinking could make a real difference. "I'll think about it, sir," Jack said finally, his voice steady but full of thought. Commander Kane gave him a small nod. "Take your time." Just know that the opportunity is there.
Ah.
And no matter what you decide, today you showed everyone that the mind can be just as powerful as the body. Before Jack could respond, a soft voice interrupted them. What's all this about mind and body? The two men turned to see one of the Zelian warriors standing in the doorway. The warrior had been watching the conversation from a distance. His face was hard, but there was something else in his eyes, curiosity. I'm here to offer my apology, the warrior said, stepping inside. We were wrong about you, human. I underestimated you, and for that, I'm sorry. Jack didn't know how to respond at first. I had expected the Zelians to hold a grudge, to challenge him again. But this was different. The warrior's words weren't filled with anger. They were filled with respect. I appreciate that, Jack said, nodding. But you don't have to apologize. You challenged me because that's what you do. But remember, sometimes it's not about winning. It's about learning something new. The warrior nodded slowly, a small sign of understanding passing between them. He turned to leave, but not before giving Jack a final glance. Good luck, human, the Zelian said quietly. We won't forget this. With that, the warrior exited the room, leaving Jack and Commander Kane standing in silence. The commander looked at Jack, a smile tugging at the corners of his lips. It seems you've earned more than just the cat today, Jack smiled, but his thoughts were still on the offer. There was a lot to think about, new path, a new challenge, a new way forward. But whatever happened next, Jack knew one thing for sure. He had already won, and that victory had made all the difference.